Let's talk about the Minnesota Vikings, who have their quarterback in Kirk Cousins, 8-9 last season, 9-8 against the number, 11-6 to the over. They played in 14 one-score games, but went 6-8 in those games. And they have a new head coach, Kevin O'Connell, taking over for Mike Zimmer, who was fired. O'Connell spending the last 2 seasons as the Rams offensive coordinator. And you think, oh my God, that's awesome. That Rams offense is incredible. And it is, but he wasn't the one calling plays. So now he gets to call plays for the Vikings. And the win total is set at 8.5 at BetMGM. Over is minus 165. The under is plus 140. And they are the second favorite to win the NFC North at plus 260 behind the Packers, who are currently your odds-on favorite at minus 165. I am not a big believer in the Vikings, but I do think that Kevin O'Connell, who is obviously a much more offensive-focused coach as opposed to Mike Zimmer, whose calling card was defense, I do think he will help Kirk Cousins and that offense, but they certainly underachieved last season.
Especially on the defense. I don't think the offense is the problem. I honestly think that the offense is the bright spot of this Vikings team. Their receiving core alone, just because they have Justin Jefferson, who is one of the premier receivers in all of football, one of the premier young receivers in all of football. And if you played longest reception props, he was usually the go-to guy when you are playing that type of prop in the NFL. So especially an offense that is going to be geared more towards throwing the football, I think this is going to be a big year for the Vikings offense. But the problem is their defense going to be any better? Because last season, it was one of the worst defenses against the run in the entire NFL, and wasn't great against the pass either. This was a bottom tier defense, bottom 5 in both passing and rushing defense. So is it a defense that, can be just a tiny bit better? Because if it's not, it's going to be a great Vikings offense, but they're going to have to score a ton of points to win games.
Yeah, third worst defense in the NFL last season. Now, they did sign Zadarius Smith from the Packers, a 3-year, $42 million deal, and that should help them. They added Harrison Phillips from the Bills, Jordan Hicks from the Cardinals. They still have a stud at safety in Harrison Smith, so there is some talent back there, but you're right. The defense was the big Achilles heel for this team, and I think they've gotten better. If they're even a little bit better, they should be able to compete, because we were talking about early on when we mentioned the Vikings how they played in 14 one-score games, and even an average defense probably gives them at least 2 or 3 more wins. They have a ton of offensive talent. I think when you look at Kirk Cousins, and the reason why I go back to him is because he's such a lightning rod for this team. And if you look at his statistics, Chelsa, they're impressive. He had 33 touchdowns last year, 7 picks, threw for over 4,200 yards, all of those statistics in the top 10. He has a ton of weapons. I think my issue is with him, and why I worry about the Vikings outside of their defense, because we know they can put up points, is that in clutch situations, I don't really trust him. And I remember reading an exchange last year, and it really hit home for me, and it was between Kirk Cousins and Mike Zimmer, and essentially Mike Zimmer was saying, Kirk, throw down the field. I mean, he's not always checking down, but he was saying, throw the ball. Don't be afraid. And Kirk Cousins admitted that he's so worried about hamstringing his team or hurting his team by throwing an interception that sometimes he will take the safe route because he's terrified of setting back his team. And I totally get that. You need to be careful. You don't want to turn over the football. At the same time, as a quarterback, if you want to win games, there are times you have to take calculated risks and be aggressive if you want your team to win, particularly when it's under a few minutes to play or you need a score.
Especially in today's NFL.
Yeah.
You are not going to beat the top tier teams in the NFL without putting up some points. Look at the top quarterbacks in the league right now. It's, you might as well take some of those risks, because if you're playing, say, football, you're not going to beat those teams, especially with the defense that the Vikings have. And the betting angle for the Vikings last season was if they were getting points, you'd play them as underdogs. Mm-hmm. But if they were, laying a touchdown, you would play the other side, because they played in 14 one-score games. That was the name of the game when it came to the Vikings. They played in a ton of close games. And from, looking and seeing maybe the pendulum swings one way or another, the Vikings 6-8 in those games. So, maybe there's some room for improvement there, but pretty middle of the road in those. I am interested to see if we see more close games for the Vikings. And I think this is a team that I'm probably just going to play on a week to week basis, whether it's props for the other team going against this defense, or like I said, if the Vikings are getting points, maybe it is a trendy dog pick, if they're getting a touchdown. But if they're laying 7 against a bad team, don't think I'd be laying it with the Vikings.
Well, coming up in 10 minutes with baseball at the All-Star break, it is a perfect time to start looking at player props from around the majors. We will do that. She's Chelsa Messenger. I'm Michael Jenkins. If you're listening to us as you're driving to work, we appreciate that. But on your drive home, you got to listen to You Better You Bet with Nick Costas and Kim Barkley. They give you the latest odds and insights before the games get underway. It is all on BetQL and all available on the Odyssey app. Chelsa, is there a bet on the board when it comes to the Vikings that you might lean towards? I'm like you. When I look at futures here, when I look at maybe offensive player of the year, you see a guy like Justin Jefferson. He's at 20-1. Dalvin Cook is at 30-1. I'm trying to find some place where maybe I might want to put my money when it comes to the Vikings. I'm not quite sure I find a place. I'm not big on the Vikings this year. I might go no to miss the playoffs or to make the playoffs, so that would be minus 115. It's pretty much a coin flip there, but there's not really a play on the board when it comes to this team that's standing out to me.
No, same. I think if I were to lean one way or the other, it would be kind of fading the Vikings. I'm not sure if I'm ready to take the under on their win total, but maybe for them to miss the playoffs, just because, again, I have questions about their defense. I still think the Packers are the team to beat in that division. And maybe the Lions are a touch better this year. Maybe they can steal a game from the Vikings this season. So I think I am not especially high on the Vikings. Maybe the way to look at this is maybe some kind of play on Justin Jefferson, because I do believe he is one of the premier receivers in the NFL. And if you're looking at this offense that is going to be geared more towards the passing attack, Justin Jefferson had the second most receiving yards in the NFL last season. And that was with an offense that, was trying to run the ball a little bit more. I'm aware they still have Dalvin Cook, who is really good and deserves his carries. But Justin Jefferson, I wouldn't be surprised if he took home some of these awards for most receiving touchdowns or, most receptions.
I don't know if you saw the story. It was probably 2 or 3 days ago, but Justin Jefferson was being interviewed and he said, in a couple years, I'm going to be the best receiver in the NFL. Number one right now is Davante Adams. He's the guy. He's a great route runner. He's the stud. He's number one. But I'm right there at number 2. Give me one more year or two. I'm going to be tops in the NFL. But you know what, Chelsea? I know that's a cocky thing to say. It's a very confident thing to say. But he's not necessarily wrong.
No, he certainly has the talent. And here's another thing. Just because somebody wins one of these awards that you can bet on for most receiving touchdowns or most receiving yards doesn't necessarily mean they're the best receiver in the NFL, because they're all talking about Davante Adams being the best receiver. Well, Cooper Kupp won every award imaginable last season.
No, you're right about that. So you just never know. And by the way, don't bet on Cooper Kupp or any receiver to win MVP, because if Cooper Kupp didn't win it last year, no receiver is ever going to win it, because he had the Triple Crown. Still drives me crazy to this day.